Look at this photo. Just two dudes having dinner at an upscale Vietnamese restaurant. Except, of course, the guy on the left is Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and the guy on the right is Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. Now, that photo was taken about 6 years ago, in 2017, and I remember seeing that and thinking, don't those two companies hate each other?
A competition is heating up between Apple and Google.
These guys are all trying to get their foot in the door.
And a recurring issue for Steve Jobs was that Google was blatantly stealing features from the iPhone.
Our lawsuit is saying, Google, you ripped off the iPhone.
Yes, there were headlines about a holy war and a threat to go thermonuclear. But back to red wine and Vietnamese cuisine. According to the New York Times, around the time of this meal, the two companies were in tense negotiations to renew one of the most lucrative business deals in history. A deal that would cement Google's place as a search engine king, the default search engine on the most popular phone in the US, and that is why the US government is suing Google. It says Google has repeatedly broken the law in maneuvering its way to becoming a monopoly gatekeeper of the internet.
Google is those two guys who created that are two of the smartest young men in the whole country.
Smart and rich. Google's parent company, Alphabet, is a $1.7 trillion company. That's 17 with 11 zeros after it. And according to the US Department of Justice's lawsuit, they got there by stacking the deck and muscling out the competition. Google pays billions of dollars each year to distributors to secure default status for its general search engine and, in many cases, to specifically prohibit Google's counterparties from dealing with Google's competitors.
For 15 years, Google has pursued a course of anti-competitive conduct that has allowed it to halt the rise of rival technologies, manipulate auction mechanics to insulate itself from competition, and force advertisers and publishers to use its tools.
So let me show you what they mean, and I'll open Chrome just as an example here. So in the top address bar, I'll type in, waterfalls in Nepal. And that takes me right away, as you can see, to Google results. Maybe that's a little bit obvious, right? Because it's Chrome, after all, that I'm using. If I go into Mozilla's Firefox, same thing. Right at the top of the address bar, we can already see that this is going to default to Google as a search engine. And let's set that aside. I mean, if we go to, this is an iPhone here, and I've got the CBC page loaded up. But if I go into the address bar here, and I type waterfalls in Nepal, because I have a weird fascination with that, once again, this takes us straight to Google by default. So that deal with Apple, you remember the dinner with Tim Cook and Sundar Pichai. How could you forget, right? In its court filing, the DOJ estimates that could be worth somewhere between $8 and $12 billion annually. As in, Google, for the privilege of being Apple's default search engine, gives Apple a hefty cut of the ad revenue it generates whenever people use its search. It's easy money for Apple and might be 15 to 20% of Apple's worldwide net income. Think about that. Maybe 20% of Apple's earnings are just Google handing it money. But this is arguably an even bigger deal for Google because Apple devices account for almost 60% of all mobile device usage in the United States. And the lawsuit repeats again and again how being the default search engine on all those devices in one fell swoop gives Google a huge competitive advantage. Google estimates that in 2019, almost 50% of its search traffic originated on Apple devices. Thus, Google views the prospect of losing default status on Apple devices as a code red scenario. Now, can you change your default search? Well, sure you can, and I'll even show you how to do it. When you have Chrome open, just as an example, if you go into that top right context menu, those three dots, right at the bottom of the page, you'll have settings. You click on that, and then about halfway, you see search engine Google. You can click on that, and then you have your choice. You can go Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, you name it. But honestly, who does that? Almost no one. And it doesn't stop there. In fact, it doesn't even start there. Because Google's suite of products come pre-installed on almost every device sold in Canada and the United States. If a phone manufacturer wants even just one app, like YouTube or Gmail, because, how can your fancy new phone not have those things? The US government says Google forces those manufacturers to take the entire bundle of core apps. So you get the search app, you get Gmail, you get Chrome, you get Maps, and you can't uninstall them even if you tried. And I've tried, right? Like if you go, again, into that settings context menu, you click apps, let's scroll down, let's go to the Google search app. You see at the bottom here, where normally you'd get like a little uninstall icon. In Google's case, you just get this disable one. You cannot remove it from the phone's storage. The lawsuit details many other ways in which it alleges Google is being anti-competitive. But the basic idea is always the same, that Google isn't the runaway market leader in search because it's the best, but rather because it has abused its weight, creating unfair disincentives for any company to even want to compete. And that has created a self-reinforcing monopoly which chokes out all rivals and which is illegal.
The actions they're accused of are pretty simple. It's maintaining a stranglehold on search and search advertising.
Google, of course, says it has broken no laws, and we're likely to see three main ways it'll make that point. One, that Google is only big because it's the best. No one does search better than Google, and that's why everyone uses it.
Google claims they compete on quality and improvements and that they did not illegally restrict competition.
Two, that it hasn't excluded competitors at all. Monopoly trials tend to be all about whether a giant in a space pushed out its rivals in an unfair way. Google says, for example, you can change your default search engine. They're all there.
It's a huge battle over the default. Okay. What is the default? The thing is, you still have a choice as a consumer.
And anyway, how is Google paying for default status any different from, say, Shreddies paying a grocery store to put its cereal at eye level? Is that unfair, or does premium real estate just cost money? But three, and maybe this is the most interesting argument of all, Google says it isn't as dominant as the lawsuit would have us believe. Because, sure, compared to other search engines, it has 90% market share. But Google doesn't just compete with search engines. It competes with Amazon when you're looking for something to buy. It competes with Reddit when you want to ask a question. It competes with Spotify when you're looking for a song. And in those cases, Google doesn't have a monopoly at all, because the world of competitors isn't just Yahoo and Bing and DuckDuckGo. It's much, much bigger than that. There's nothing illegal about having a monopoly, but cheating your way to the front of the pack is against the law.
Being a monopoly unto itself is not illegal. How you get to become a monopoly or maintain your monopoly is where the problem lies.
And this is a huge trial, 10 weeks, the first monopoly trial of the internet era. Has Google harmed its competitors by excluding them? Has it harmed advertisers by being so big it can charge whatever it wants? And has it harmed us by limiting choice and hoovering up all personal data so that it can get bigger and bigger? A judge will determine how this all ends. And for a moment, just imagine being in his spot, weighing the merits of both sides in a world where increasingly few players control our information, entertainment, business, communication, where they navigate our route to work in cars they control, powered by artificial intelligence that does all the thinking. To say there's a lot at stake is a massive understatement.